Okay, good afternoon members, officers and any members of the public in the public gallery or viewing the live stream. Welcome to this meeting of the Scrutiny and Overview Committee. My name is Councillor Graham Cohn and I'm chairing this meeting. My Vice Chair is Councillor Stephen Drew, sitting to my right. I will introduce other attendees when I invite them to speak. Committee members, may I remind you that you should have before you the main agenda. Those in the chamber are reminded that this meeting is being live streamed, so by being here you are consenting to that. The normal process at Scrutiny and Overview Committee meeting is to review and make recommendations to Cabinet by affirmation. Only those members of the committee present in the chamber will be able to move and second motions or affirm. However, members present virtually may speak in the debate. May I ask those who are joining us remotely to ensure that their cameras and microphones remain off unless they are addressing the committee. For those of us present in the room, please ensure your microphone is close to you when you speak and speak clearly into it when addressing the room. Finally, a report of this meeting will be presented to Cabinet at its meeting on the 24th of June. Neither myself or my Deputy Chair will be able to attend that meeting. Is there anyone present that would be going to Cabinet would be able to do that for us? It's the 24th of June. Thank you, Councillor Bradman. Yeah, we'll make a note of that. So we'll move on to the main agenda. So do we have any apologies for absence?
Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Aidan van der Veer and Councillor Fain is online.
Thank you. So we'll move on to item 3, declarations of interest. Does any member have any declarations of interest? Councillor Bradman.
Thank you, Chair. We all have an interest in the civil parking enforcement because it's being conducted in all of our throughout South Cambridgeshire. So do we have an exemption to speak on that?
Yeah, I think that's a given for all members. Thank you for noting that, Councillor Bradman. Any other declarations of interest? No? Okay, so we'll move on to item 4, which is the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 5 to 10. Has anybody got anything that they want to raise on the minutes at all? Councillor Stobart.
Chair, thank you. So during the discussion on the waste food collection process, we touched upon the characteristics of the vehicles that would be employed, and I'd asked if I could see an options appraisal for the vehicle choice. It wasn't actually entered in the minutes, but we've taken some action subsequently, so I do have a copy with which I'm happy. So
lovely.
I think that particular loop is closed.
Thank you for noting that, Councillor Stobart. Any other things for the minutes of the last meeting that was held anyone wants to raise? Okay, so we'll move on to public questions. Has there been any public questions?
There are none, Chair.
Okay. So I was going to come on to the next item, the main item on the agenda, which is civil parking enforcement review. Pages 11 to 118. Just before I come on to that, the next 2 items on the agenda, item 7 and 8, Councillor Batchelor, I think you wanted us to swap those around. Is that correct?
If that's possible, because obviously I'm here to speak on the civil parking and the lift programme, which are sort of either side of the sandwich of the KPI methodology. So for my own sake, you know, it's a selfish request. If we could switch 7 and 8 round, I'd certainly appreciate it.
Okay, so I'll put that to the committee. I think I would be happy to swap those if the committee are happy to do so. Can I get agreement on that?
Agreed.
I can't.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you for that. So we will do item 8 before item 7, but let's start with item 6, which is civil parking enforcement review, pages 11 to 118. Who would like to start on civil parking? Jump at one.
Item closed.
Yeah, next item.
Councillor Richard Williams.
Councillor Richard Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to start. Sorry, I wondered if we were getting a presentation or not. Thank you very much for the report, for those who produced it. Just a few points I had on this one. Just firstly, in terms of, I think, the overall report, it's important to note the issue of deterrence, which doesn't really get a huge amount, I think, of attention, and that if there are fewer infringements, then that doesn't necessarily mean there's, that's a positive thing. So that there is a deterrent benefit to our communities. I think that should be taken into account. I did have a question about the modelling, which looks like it's very much out of line with reality, and quite how we've ended up with modelling that significantly seems to overestimate the amount of revenue. I think that is a concern, that the modelling was so out of line. So I'd be interested if there are any explanation as to why that was the case. And my third point just concerns the survey that was conducted, particularly for parish councils. Now I'm pretty close to 100% sure that Whittlesford didn't respond to that and hadn't really clocked that the survey was being carried out. I know it was in the e-bulletin that was sent around, I think in March, but it wasn't, as far as I could tell, very prominently promoted to parish councils, and a number of them may have missed it. And, Whittlesford being significant in that Whittlesford had a very big parking problem on Station Road West, which has essentially been resolved by civil parking enforcement. That there is hardly any illegal parking now, whereas there was a daily problem, and it was a real blight for the residents. So in that sense, it's been a huge success. But I don't think they were aware that this survey was being carried out. So I think maybe we could perhaps look at rerunning that a little bit later in the year. And of course, bearing in mind, as we all know, that parish councils sometimes work on a slightly slow timetable. So I think it was open for about 6 to 8 weeks, if I can remember. But sometimes parish councils they might meet bi-monthly, and they therefore miss a survey because they might need to have a meeting before they can actually come up with a response. So they were my points, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Richard Williams. Shall I come over to Councillor John Williams on that? Or Henry Batchelor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, so the 3 questions there, I will take them out of order, if that's okay. So the question around deterrence, yeah, absolutely good point, because obviously the fewer people that are receiving tickets, obviously the fewer deterrents there are for other people to continue parking correctly. So absolutely, I'm happy to take that away, and if we do need to write a report for a future scrutiny committee, I'm absolutely happy to have that taken into account. Question around the survey. I mean, I'm sure Gareth can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think you are right. It was open for a set period of time. I think it was 6 weeks, and in terms of promotion, it was promoted predominantly through us, through district councillors, but also in bulletins and in the parish e-bulletin. I know it was promoted to parish councils directly through that, and I think you are right, the response rate was lower than I was expecting in terms of responses. I think the majority of responses were from district councillors rather than from parishes. Again, what you read into that, I don't know. Maybe some parishes don't have a parking issue. Maybe the only ones that responded are ones that did. But I know, in terms of promotion, maybe we could promote it slightly differently or run it for longer. And your request to run it again in the future, absolutely, I don't see why we wouldn't do that. It doesn't cost us any money to do that, so why wouldn't we? And around the modelling, so in terms of the modelling, I think it's probably better if I throw over to our colleagues from the County Council, who I think are online, I can't see. But in terms of actually how the modelling was done, I think it's probably better to have a technical answer from them, if that's
Yeah.
okay, Chair.
So, if anyone from the county council wants to come in on that.
Yeah. Well, Brian, if you could answer that, I'm sure everyone would be happy.
I'm not sure I can answer that. What I can do, if the chair will allow me, in partial response to Richard's comments. First off, the number of tickets that are being issued and how that matches with the forecast. So the essential problem was that we had got to a stage where the police had abandoned any action on parking restrictions, and people realised that they could park quite freely all day long on a double yellow line, and were completely ignoring that restriction. What we've found since the parking enforcement officers were deployed is that a combination of things means that it's quite difficult for them to actually get people ticketed because they aren't there long enough. So they'll stop and wait and pop into a shop. The civil parking enforcement officers can watch them do it, and then they have to give them a grace period of 5 minutes before they can issue them a ticket. So mostly they can get away with that, which is rather unfortunate. And it means that the number of tickets doesn't actually reflect the amount of offending going on. So although we have had much improved double yellow parking for longer periods, and that's been quelled because, of course, if you go and park on double yellow lines and go to work in a local office, for example, then you're likely to get a ticket. So it has been successful in quelling that infringement of double yellow lines. However, there are other rather stickier places which has been found difficult to do. And I've been in conversation with Nicola Gardner, the officer who manages the policy county, and we're looking at alternative ways of minimising, for example, that waiting period, so that we can give people tickets immediately should they be infringing. So I don't know if that's some help to the committee.
Thank you for that, Councillor Milnes. Lovely. Okay, I'll just bring in Gareth Bell.
Thanks, Chair. I think also we've got Richard Ling from the County Council, who's probably going to be able to come in off the back of what I'll say here. So, obviously, the report here reflects information that was presented to the County Council in advance of civil park enforcement being agreed. As the report says, they commissioned RTA Associates Limited, who are really experienced in this, to look at what was the projections and expectations. I know that I certainly questioned county colleagues when the projections come back at a kind of flat line in regards to ticketing, because as I would expect there to be a reduction over time, which we've seen. But I think possibly Richard will be able to give a little bit more insight into why that was the case. But what I do know is that obviously RTA Associates used information and what they've seen in other parts of the country in similar areas. So perhaps we're seeing a more positive result here, as members have said, that there's a deterrent and we're seeing a reduction. But I'll hand back to you, Chair.
Lovely. Richard Ling, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just going to Councillor Mills' comment about waiting for people, going into the shop. I think it's actually 10 minutes. So yes, you can get a lot done in 10 minutes. So, it's almost you can go to the shop. As long as you're back by 10 minutes, they can't issue the ticket, which is a shame. But we are following the practice of parking. You may have seen some sort of rogue operators around, strangely local authorities are, I'll say the gold standard of enforcement. A comment also about Whittlesford and the improvement there. I know that was the one around the railway station. You know, people get on trains and go away for the whole day. It was a very short waiting period. That seems to have had a really good improvement, so it's good to have some feedback on that. If I could hand over to Nicola Gardner, my policy manager. I think Nicola's got some more information about the survey, and I think Gareth, to be fair, has already provided quite a lot of information about that. But Nicola, do you have anything to add?
I think Gareth has really covered it well. It was historical. It's a company that's experienced in delivering civil parking enforcement. They're working on the data they had and applied that. I think as Councillor Mill said, as we didn't have any sort of police data, it was difficult to ascertain what the forward plan would look like. I think that's possibly all I can sort of add to that.
No, I think that's reasonable. I think we've had a clear answer on that. Richard Williams, did you want to come back in on that at all?
No, thanks. I'll let other members to speak. I feel my questions were answered. Thank you.
Councillor Milnes, did you want to come in very briefly on this point, or?
Well, just on a general point, one of the things that the public find difficult to understand is why parking enforcement officers can't issue tickets under certain circumstances or for certain offences. And they've got actually a fairly limited ability to do so. So, for example, if a vehicle was obstructing the highway, they wouldn't necessarily be able to pin them down for that offence. And others mounting the pavement, for example, is another one that still is a police power, and they still don't have any interest in helping us in that regard because of their own resources issue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Milnes. Okay, so we'll come on to Richard Stobart next. Councillor Richard Stobart.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. So, three things. The first one quite brief because it touches on the parish council interactions that came up a moment ago. I mean, my own experience of discussing it with parish councils was they were kind of interested, but some struggled to identify where in the parish there was a parking issue. So it was kind of an engagement question. But I was wondering now that you know, the parish councils have seen it in action, are they more engaged? Are they actually, because I don't think they have to wait for a survey, they can actually write in, there's an email address, and details could be sent in of a particular parking issue. So perhaps that's a first consideration. And then are they beginning to see the joining up of, for example, the county's LTI initiative? You know, proposing double yellow lines where there might be dangerous parking, and then that, of course, would connect with civil parking enforcement in due course. So, parish council interactions, are they trending well, and how do we keep that on track? So that's the first thing. Second, where, and Councillor Milnes just mentioned this, if the enforcement officers do see what would be a police type offence, parking on the curb, something like that, blocking the road, do the CP officers report that to the police? Is that their duty? And finally, are we getting feedback from the officers themselves? So how are they feeling about what they're doing? And is there any way that we can support them, encourage them? It would be nice to get some feedback from the officers themselves, perhaps indirectly, but nevertheless, how's the job going?
Councillor Batchelor.
Yeah, thank you. So the question was around parish councils. So yeah, some are more engaged in this process than others. I mean, for a multitude of reasons. One, some parishes don't have parking issues. They're too small or they're too remote, so people don't tend to park poorly there. Other ones simply don't have the infrastructure in place to warrant a visit from a parking traffic warden, i.e., as you know, Councillor Mills just said, you need to have very specific things in place, like you need to have very clear double yellow lines, you need to have signage indicating if there's a parking restriction in that area, because you know whatever the parking restriction is, it needs to be enforceable. So some parishes simply aren't set up at the moment to warrant a traffic warden going there. to visit. So I think those are the ones that are slightly less engaged in this process because they either know that they don't have a problem or that they aren't set up to be enforceable. And I think you mentioned the LHI initiative from the county council as well. So based on the fact that we now, or South Cambs has traffic wardens, I know that has been sort of a motivating factor for some parishes to actually go out and try and secure double yellow lines in places where they know they have a parking problem, so that it then becomes enforceable, so that the traffic wardens can go there in the future to enforce. So I know that those, there is a correlation there. In terms of feedback from the officers, do officers report to the police? I don't know, but I think the answer is probably no. I think the traffic wardens only enforce what they're there to enforce. I think the reason that we actually went down the path of trying to get civil parking enforcement in South Cambridgeshire is because the police have been very upfront and honest and said, this isn't a priority for us. We aren't going to prioritise giving people tickets, stopping bad parking. We're too understaffed, and we have other priorities, which I understand. So yeah, I don't know the actual answer to that. Do traffic wardens report poor parking that they can't enforce to the police who can? I don't know, but I probably hazard a guess at no. And feedback from officers, again, I'm sure officers do feedback. So again, that might be a question for our county council colleagues who manage the traffic wardens, to see if they get any feedback. But obviously any feedback that they have given us that will help improve the service, yeah, I'm sure we, or the county as the managing authority of it, would have taken that on board.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stobart.
Thank you to Councillor Batchelor for the responses. I think this we talked about, or Councillor Batchelor raised the question of this kind of correlating effect. So if we can find a way to encourage parish councils to adopt some agency here if they have got parking issues, to use the set of tools that they've got at their disposal, and that may be down to county and a successful LHI bid. But I think we should be encouraging parish councils because they're the ones that are actually seeing the issues around their patch. So yeah, just a comment, but thank you to Councillor Batchelor.
I was just going to bring in Richard Ling there online.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just following on from Councillor Batchelor's useful feedback there. Yeah, I think there is now a strong connection between parishes putting in double yellow schemes and the enforcement, where before they'd put them in and the police, under their own admission, have little resources to monitor those. Now we do have a team to do it. So there is the local highway initiative scheme that parishes can bid for. In regards to parking, there was mention of parking on pavements. It's not actually illegal to park on a pavement outside London in the UK. We have been discussing with DFT if that could be a national thing to look at. So unless there is a double yellow line alongside that pavement, then the civil enforcement officers are not able to enforce it. I look to my colleagues if there's any feedback. There was a comment about, do we report things that we see to the police if they are beyond our powers? I've got Ian and Nicola on the call. Ian may have an answer to that. And also there's a comment of how well we think the scheme is going. Again, I look to Ian. Feel free if you've got any feedback on that. Oh, and sorry, the second thing, there was the parishes about reporting. In the report under item 27, there is an email address there, parkingcontrol@cambridgeshire.gov.uk. We're always ready to receive feedback from any parishes, specific items in their areas, where then the civil parking team can direct officers to that area.
Thank you for that, Richard Ling. I think we'll move on. Councillor Judith Rippeth.
Yeah, I was equally stunned to read at paragraph 22 that the idea that the number of tickets issued wouldn't go down over time. I just thought that was absolutely incredible, because surely this is to enable behaviour change, and people tend to do things when there's a bit of a incentive, i.e. not to get fined. So obviously that is looking like it may not be a cost neutral thing in the future. However, because it is, I think, having a positive effect in making life better for residents across the district, certainly is in areas of Milton Waterbeach, something that we should continue to support, even if that means some financial burden to ourselves. And my other point that I get quite, I don't know, irritated by is that parking on pavements, and could there be possibly, I'm sure this has happened before, but a letter sent to central government. If these civil parking enforcement schemes are kind of running across the country, I can't imagine it's just here that we have that issue, because it's a real serious danger if people with prams or in wheelchairs have to go into the road to get around vehicles, which is sometimes the case. I think we need to be quite proactive as a council here, not just the county council, but the district council, with maybe writing to say, can this not be made one of the kind of like an enforcement issue for civil parking enforcement officers, where they can actually ticket? It sounds like there has to be a change in the law, but could there be some action taken to encourage that? And they're really kind of comments, but that is a question as well.
Lovely. Councillor Batcher.
Yeah, thank you. So the first point first, around the scheme needs to be cost neutral. Absolutely. So the way the scheme's currently funded is by the GCP. So the GCP have funded this scheme for 5 years. We're currently in year 2 of 5. So by the end of year 5, the money runs out, and the scheme either needs to be self-supporting or there needs to be some kind of financial commitment from somewhere to keep the scheme going. The way the scheme was originally set up was at the end of year 2, so at the end of this year, it's up to the county council to come back to, I say us, the GCP, with a proposal or a set of proposals on how to keep the scheme running past year 5 based on the data they've accrued over the first 2 years. So yeah, I mean, one, I'm not putting words in your mouths, but one recommendation might be to ask us to put pressure on the county to get those recommendations to us at the end of the 2-year period, so that we can then make an early decision about what to do. I know we've got LGR coming, so that might complicate things, but we have to continue as we are at the moment. So yes, the scheme does need to be self-funding, and of course, if, as we've seen, the number of tickets issued does drop, that obviously has a negative impact, because it means there's less money coming into in from the scheme, so it makes it more difficult, and means the shortfall that needs to be picked up is a lot larger. So yes, absolutely agree that the scheme does need to be cost neutral. Parking on pavements, yeah, it's a national issue, so it's a national legislation that does need to be changed. So obviously we as an authority can lobby central government. We're happy to do that. We want as many, civil parking enforcement to be a success in South Cambridgeshire. So, the more powers that the officers have to do that is obviously only going to be a positive. But it might be worth, writing to your MP as well. MPs can lobby central government more directly than we can. So, yeah, it's worth raising that, but it is a national issue, absolutely.
Thank you for that, Councillor Batcher. Councillor Rippeth, did you want to come back on the funding?
No, I
side
just
or
think, yeah, we can individually lobby and we can lobby our MPs, but I think as a council we should certainly do some lobbying directly. And yeah, it looks like the future unitary will be picking up the price tag, but I think it has to be set so it's not a mess, so it's clear what's happening, and we at the moment we still got the agency for that. But thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll come on to Councillor Heather Williams next.
I think that's working now. Okay, yeah. Paper's looking like it's not, but I think it is. Okay. So CPE, one thing I've done, some members know, and I believe the chair's okay to display, I've done a very rough map, because we have the really great list of everywhere and all the roads and all the visits, but it's very difficult actually to imagine where they are and figure it out. So I don't know if Pip is allowed to display it. Well, it's just in future reports, and if we can get this retrospectively, perhaps, is so we can see whereabouts is a key. I don't know if you see that, whereabouts it's going, because what you'll see that in this report, there are places with train stations that have parking problems where CPE then is not happening. And there's one in my ward, which is Oddsey, which is within the parish of Stephen Morden, which has a huge parking problem many days, and yet it's not been visited once. So I think as well, when we're looking at the modelling about how it's affordable, how effective it is, and what have you, we do also, before we start using more money, need to look at where it is. And as Councillor Richmond says, it has acted as a deterrent in some places, and that's great. But actually, is it because we're not going to all the places we need to be going to make sure that we actually resolve with our parking problems? Because you can see there are big swathes of area that have had no parking enforcement this year. Some of those places, yes, will be because, as has been said, they're rather small and everything. I don't know if it's possible. I did share a picture. I think Pippa's got it of it come through Teams. I think that way we could send it, of a parking problem. I just wanted to do this because otherwise people think that parking is just for the larger places, parking problems. They're really not. So in Oddsey, it's a hamlet of about 25 houses, and yet if we're able to show the photo, you'll see the scale of the problem, and yet no CPE has gone that way. Now, I admittedly have done this with a highlighter because it was the easiest way to do it. But I think when we're looking at the way reports are done in the future, those sorts of heat maps are really helpful to get a sense of place as well as to where things are being done, because all of us want to see the parking resolved across the whole of South Cambs, whereas when you look at that map, it does look like it's predominantly just happening around a few miles around the city and a couple of other areas, and not really through other parts of the district. So that's the main thing, I think, when we're looking at reports and how it's stylised. So yeah, that's the hamlet of Oddsey, and yes, there are double yellow lines. Yeah, there was that day. So you can see, very difficult, lots of things going on, double yellow lines. Now, this is not a one-off, and yet CPE isn't actually, we have CPE, perhaps they thought it was Hertfordshire and it had dropped off the map, I don't know. But I wanted to say the problem is not resolved, and you can see that from this photo here. So please don't forget us on the edges, and that little bit further out from Cambridge, we do have parking problems, and those along there, much of that is enforceable. I completely agree, though, that the deterrent is really important as well. So if you take away the deterrent, the problems then do return. And I'm sure there's places where that has worked, and we need to keep that. But yeah, it's more about when we see the reports going forward, can we try and get an idea of where throughout the district and making sure everybody's benefiting from this policy? Because at the moment, it doesn't feel like the balance is quite there.
Councillor Batchelor.
Yeah, thank you. And firstly, I think that map is really useful. I mean, none of the information is new in a sense, because obviously we have a list every quarter sent to us of where the enforcement has been happening, where the officers have visited, numbers of tickets issued. But that, a visualisation of that is obviously really, really useful. So, I thank Councillor Williams for actually, taking the time to do that, and getting the pencil case out is really, really is helpful. Obviously, I can't commit to supplying that, because it's the county council that does provide these the data and the stats, and it's not for me to put more work onto them. But obviously, they are on the call and they have heard the request. So, I just back that up by saying I certainly found that helpful. And if there is a version of that that's not very time consuming that could be included with the stats, then I'm sure that will be appreciated by everyone that receives them. In terms of areas covered, so I think, just to reiterate, I know not all places do have an issue. Clearly, the example we saw does, but it does need to be enforceable. So if there are double yellow lines there, absolutely it can be enforced. Not everywhere is enforceable because it doesn't have the correct signage, doesn't have the correct lines. And of course, requests for civil parking enforcement can be made by anyone at any time. There's an email address that's already been highlighted in the report, and I think there is a section of the County Council's website specifically for reporting issues in South Cambridgeshire. So yeah, I mean, yeah, not sure if I can add much more to that. Just that there is a reporting tool, and yeah, I don't think there's any reason why people aren't, officers aren't going to certain places unless they had a good reason.
Thank you for that, Councillor Batchel. I'll just bring in Richard Ling just to comment on the feasibility of heat maps and so forth.
Yeah, first, thank you for the heat map. It's very useful. It's nice to see some artwork. If we look at the red areas on the map against where the double yellow lines are in the county, we did see a strong correlation between them. I think the photo that was also shown there, it did appear there was some sort of, I don't think that's a typical day at Steeple Morden railway station. It seemed to be there was some sort of luxury car event. Odyssey.
So that was on the hotel side, but all the other side, we get on average 80 to 100 cars a day.
Right. Yeah, because I can see there's some double yellow. I can see it on Google Maps at the moment, and also some people who seem to put their cars into the hedge, which doesn't have double yellow lines in there. That is something that we can take away. That's the reports that we're looking for. So, Ian, if you could note that area and see if we can get some enforcement in more down there. Thank you.
Lovely. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. That would be nice. Yes, there was obviously an event, but that wasn't needing enforcing. It's the other side of the road. But they did look very nice cars, you're right. I was just one other thing that I've mentioned about the consultation for my parishes, and I don't know if it's the same throughout the district. Actually, the parishes have their AGMs in March and in April and May, and through that period. So I know my parishes won't do ordinary business, they'll just have their AGM at that time. So that might also have been a factor in people not taking part, because then by the time they have their next one, it had been past the deadline. So maybe if we could try and avoid that sort of, because if you look, it's sort of in the regulated period, which is when the parishes do their AGMs, that might help with response.
Okay, lovely, thank you for that. Councillor Anna Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. So, a couple of things. One is the granularity of the data provided, which I can understand. So, we're starting at page 23. We've got the list of roads where officers attended. In some places, for example, there is Cambridge Road, Industrial Estate, Milton, but that road has a number of arms or legs on it, and some of them are obvious places where people park and can easily be ticketed because they stay there at all sorts of times of day and night. But there are other places where I had actually asked that they would go and attend, and I had to actually sorry, what I'm asking for is greater granularity of where they're actually doing the enforcement, because the particular place where I was asking them to go and enforce, which was a particular location, wasn't difficult, it was outside a particular location, they weren't going there because they were doing all their ticketing at the other place, which was just useful. But anyway, so it would be useful if they could actually identify precisely where they've gone, which would be handy, a bit more detail, but that's helpful. And then coming back to paragraph 22, the business about the volume of PCNs being issued decreasing over time, and the explanation given was this indicates higher levels of compliance. But it just occurs to me there's other possible reasons for it dropping over time. Obviously, the first is that people have got a ticket and have been deterred from parking there again in the same way. That's the ideal reason. But is it possible that in the same way that the parishes weren't aware of the consultation, they didn't use that email to alert the parking enforcement officers to go to a particular location? So is it a drop-off in reporting of places to go to? That's a second possible reason. And the third one is a loss of enthusiasm from the public in reporting places to go to. And I'm not saying that the officers were not going or not doing their job. Obviously they were, we've got the records. But if there's a public perception, well, I reported that and nothing happened, then there's a loss of enthusiasm from the public to actually use it. And also, how are we actually publicising that reporting address to the public? I obviously put it in my county report and share it and all that kind of thing, but how do the police know, how do the public know to report if they're concerned about it? Obviously parishes do, but if people report and nothing seems to change, they will stop reporting.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bradnam. Councillor Batchelor.
Thanks. I could probably answer 1.5 of those, and I have to ask our county colleagues to come back on some of the more detailed answers. So starting with the locations and around the numbers of tickets issued dropping off. So it could be a lack of enthusiasm, albeit in my experience, people are quite enthusiastic to tell us about poor parking and and tell the authorities where they think poor parking is. So anecdotally, I don't think so. I think the official answer that's in the papers is probably the more likely of the scenarios. In terms of obviously numbers of tickets dropping off and compliance being higher, I think we just saw from the map that there are areas that are more heavily, sort of traffic wardened, more heavily visited by the traffic wardens. So, and I think it's mainly in the more frequently visited areas that we are seeing more compliance, where more tickets are being or were being issued. Places like Whistlesworth Station, for example, sort of the more sort of urbanised areas. So I think it's probably fair to say that the response given in the paper is probably the more likely, albeit, as you say, there's no sort of 100% surefire way of knowing that. Maybe enthusiasm has dropped off, but I think it's probably less likely. In terms of the granularity of data, that would be one I have to throw over to the county officers, because obviously again it's their data that they send to us every quarter. So again, I can't commit to being more accurate with how it's reported. It'd be something that they'd have to take away and comment on themselves. So yeah, I'd have to throw that one back to them, Chair, if that's okay.
Lovely. Did Richard want to come in there, Richard Lee? You're on mute, Richard.
Madam Chair. Oh, so is that unmuted?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Sorry, I'm not too sure I've got all the answers, so I will. I'll probably look to Ian and Nicola. In regards to the number of tickets going down, I believe the resource is stable, so I think it is a case of yes, if you get a ticket, would you park there again? You'd hope not. Also, if you park in that area, you see a car with a ticket on it, it also puts you off as well. So I think that is the main factor of the granularity of the data. I didn't prepare it myself. I don't know, Ian, Nicola, if you've got any feedback on that? For volunteers, I think they might have. Ian.
Hello. So regarding the granularity of data, the way we source that is when our officers are out doing patrols, they effectively log into each area. So that is where the data is sourced from. It is possible if they are, say, in the vehicles patrolling an area, if they drive past the area, do not see any infringements in place, they may not stop and get out and log the area, which could sort of be an oversight of the reporting system we are using. So we could look to report in other methodologies, such as through vehicle tracking and that avenue, to see where our officers have been.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bradnam, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, it was just about the location. It's just if somebody is very specific about where they're asking the officers to go to, it would be gratifying if the officers would actually record that that is the place that they've gone to. Because, as I said, there's Cambridge Road, which has 3 different legs, and I had asked them to go to precisely one leg, and I couldn't confirm. When I said, can you tell me, did you go to this leg? They said, oh, our data doesn't record that. So that was a bit frustrating. The only other thing was, I think other members might want to ask about the financial side of things. But I just wanted to ask, in view of the ongoing viability of the civil parking enforcement, whether we can actually get any learnings from the City Council, because it's possible they may have information that would be helpful to us.
I'm just going to bring Gareth Belling, so I know you wanted to come in on this. Yeah.
Yeah, but just one other point. Just on that point, obviously, Cambridge City and South Cam's been very different, with a different kind of people coming in and out of the city in a different way, and I think that's probably where some of that more stable number of tickets issued is going to kind of come from. South Cam's, I mean, City being quite different, but I'm sure there's other areas where there's learnings come from. The point I was, Chair, that I just wanted to kind of share was just taking members back to before civil parking enforcement begun. So we did a huge amount of work, not just with members, but with parishes. We had forums with parishes, inviting them to find out about civil parking enforcement. That included them understanding the opportunities around the local highway improvement scheme, also ways that they could fund themselves double yellow lines in their areas where there may be impacts. And also educating heavily on the different mechanisms, including directly to the county council reporting matters. So I think that, as always, it's, you know, you can encourage people to attend. It's not attendance kind of across the whole area. Obviously, there's some parts of the district which are they have more acute parking problems that are more kind of attracted to this. But I just wanted to make that point, Chair, that I think that we did a huge amount of work, and obviously the county council and through the reports that we provide to members, and we obviously ask our members to work with parishes to make sure that they've continued to have that information, to make sure that we continue to have good information to feed into the patrols.
Councillor Bradnam.
Yeah, thank you. I've got no further questions. I'm just mindful that we need to understand what's actually happening. Are we making a difference in behaviours? It'd be good to think we are, and that it's reducing.
Thank you for...
But in that case, we need to think about the income.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, Councillor James Hobro.
Thank you, Chair. So I had a couple of questions. I mean, first of all, I think this scheme was much anticipated because before we took on civil parking enforcement, then there was definitely a perception that the police enforcement had dwindled almost to non-existence. It had become quite well known that you could park illegally with impunity. So I mean, the view that I've heard from parishes is that they're very grateful that this has taken place. And the limited feedback I've had has been that it has so far been well received as a return to successful enforcement from a regime where there wasn't much going on. So my first question was really about engagement with parishes and with the public. So I wondered, are we satisfied that we've got an effective sort of two-way mechanism between parish councils and the enforcement team, so that the feedback from parish councils to the team on where enforcement's needed is effective, and also that feedback on whether or not it's working is effective. So it strikes me that parish councils are best placed to understand the issues, and that, you know, at a district level we're not going to have much of a chance of understanding issues. The civil parking enforcement team themselves went without really good feedback from parishes, so I think that communication line is crucial. I wanted to check that we're satisfied that it's working well. I also wanted to ask about public engagement. So it seems to me that at some point, once the scheme is bedded in, there probably ought to be a wider public engagement that goes beyond parish councils. So I'm interested in whether or not we've got something like that planned. That's my first question about engagement. And I wanted to ask about...
James, let's take that one first,
okay.
And then I'll come back to you.
Thank you.
Councillor Batchelor.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, two questions around engagement there. So firstly around parish council engagement and around whether that's working or not. So in terms of the mechanism for reporting parking, from a personal point of view, I think the mechanism is there, i.e., you know, we have direct email addresses, there's a function online for it to be reported. I think where maybe we can do a bit of work is the promotion of that. So rather than just relying on sales as district councils, I think we as an authority, or even the GCP who are funding this thing, could actually do some, a bit of PR essentially with parish councils directly around, some additional promotion of how to engage with the parking enforcement team. But in terms of the actual mechanism itself, I don't have any issues with how that's operating. But obviously, how we promote that, I think we do still have some more things we could do. And as an authority here, I'm happy to take a look at that. Around public engagement, in terms of what we have planned in the future, I don't think we have anything planned, albeit it might not be a bad thing to do that. Obviously, we're only 1 year into the scheme at the moment, and it's currently funded for another 5. And I think, as I said a bit earlier, I found places that do have bad parking are already quite vocal about that. So, they don't need encouragement to engage with us on that. They do, off their own bat already. But yeah, I don't think there's any more I can say on that. I don't know, Gareth, if I've missed anything there on public engagement.
Please, yeah.
No, I think Councillor Batchelor's covered that. I think that, we do a huge amount, and I do think that it is very effective that the team at the County Council, I was talking to them earlier today, continue on a weekly basis to get feedback from communities, whether that's parishes or residents, about issues. So I don't think that's a problem. I think in regards to ongoing engagement, it's probably a matter that we could kind of come back to in our magazine, just in regards to people understanding what the effect of civil parking enforcement has been, and also giving that prompt and reminder around how people can report. So that's something that I'll take away.
Thanks very much. Okay, Councillor Hobro.
Great, thank you for the answers. That's really clear. I mean, I think it is too early for a major public engagement, but I'd hope maybe we consider that after 2 or 3 years, perhaps. And I think perhaps we as members could help with with promoting the two-way communication between parishes and the team. So my other question was going to be about the financing of the scheme. So I noticed that in the numbers over time, then it's clear that the number of tickets is gradually going down, and we might expect that to happen if the process is working. If what's happened is that enforcement has got going, people who were parking illegally have gradually realised that they're going to be ticketed, we might expect the income gradually to diminish over time. And I know that the scheme is currently backed up by money from the GCP, and that in 5 years, the idea is that it should be handed over to South Cambs, and with a view that, I think to quote from the report, that it should be self-financing. I've forgotten exactly what the words are, but I think the idea was that after 5 years, it ought to be a self-financing scheme. So my question was about the flexibility in the staffing and the financing and the back office systems. So I appreciate that quite a lot of those will be fixed costs. So I wondered whether we're in a position to run this in such a way that if the income does continue to decrease and ends up being significantly lower than was modelled, are we in a position to adapt the scheme so that we can keep it in place, keep it as a deterrent to illegal parking, but run it at the kind of lower costs that reflect the lower income that we might expect to get in that situation. And my other question about the costs was whether or not at the point of handover, and I realise this is in a few years' time, whether or not at the point of handover there would be significant capital costs because of new back-end systems. There doesn't seem to be any mention of that in the report, even though the handover is discussed.
Councillor Batchelor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Okay. So, in terms of financing, so I think, as you've indicated, what we have been seeing is a drop-off in income because fewer people are parking poorly legally, so fewer tickets are being issued. We have seen that over the first year. That is a reality. So the modelling that we've seen in the paper isn't actually reflecting what is happening in reality. So I think we are going to be in a position where at the end of the 5 years, if that trend continues, the gap will be a lot more that we need to make up once the GCP stop funding. But the way, I think I mentioned this earlier as well, the way this programme is set up is at the end of this year, so the end of year 2, the County Council need to come to us as the operators of this scheme and give us a list of options about what, if the trend continues, as it has done over the first 2 years, what the options are. Do we have to put our hand in our pocket? Do we have to, change the way the system's operated? Do we have to run it at a lower cost? What are the various options? And then we, as ultimately the ones that would be financing or part financing it, need to make a decision on that. So, yeah, there will be a deficit to make up, but who makes that up? And as I think I mentioned earlier, we've got local government reform coming in, maybe 2 years' time, we don't know. So, the whole sort of local government landscape across Cambridgeshire will look different anyway. But in terms of actually sort of the detail around the systems and, what the actual solution could be to reduce the running costs, and whether that's an internal change or not. Again, I'd probably have to ask our colleagues at the county if they've got any views on that at this stage. It may not be at this stage. It may be too early to say, but I'm sure they can probably give you a bit more of a technical answer than I could on that.
Gareth Bell.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to clarify that point around that handover. So it's a handover of responsibility for the deficit. So at the moment, for the first 5 years, that's covered by GCP. And the agreements we have is at the end of year 5, that responsibility would fall to this or any future council. That's not handing over the responsibility for administering the scheme. So again, we've got local government reorganisation, which kind of throws a few spanners in the works. But if you go on the status quo of the structure as we are now, the county council continues to administer the scheme, but the potential operational deficit would fall to the district council to cover that cost. And therefore, as Councillor Batchelor has described, there's some decisions for members over the coming period, but we're not at that point yet, around options, and there's been a good debate in the chamber around the priority and how that should look, but that's probably a conversation for another day.
Councillor Braddon, did you want to come in on this point briefly? Yeah.
Because I wanted to draw members' attention to paragraph 10, where it says exactly what Gareth Bell has just reminded us of, that at the end of the first 5 years, South Cambs District Council is or will be responsible for the cost of any operational deficit.
Yeah,
so
thank you for that.
It's clear that we have to take that debt on.
Yeah, thank you for that. Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. I've just been listening to a lot of conversations about communications with parishes, and I wondered whether we've got quite a bit of information that we've gathered in the past from the work that Gareth Bell has done when the scheme was launched. There's probably quite a lot of information and things that you've already done the work for already with that. We've got the email address. We're considering possibly resending the survey. I'm just thinking we could potentially we could highlight the local highways initiative process to people again. We could amalgamate all of this into some kind of small toolkit that we could send to parishes, probably without too much extra work from what we've already gathered already, just to remind people of the email address, the Highways Initiative, and the survey again. And the other thing I did think could potentially be a useful thing for parishes and towns would be some kind of communication that could help promote considerate parking, not just the sort of double yellow line enforcement, but I mean, I live in a new town and we don't have that many double yellow lines, so some of the issues that we have are not something that a parking attendant could deal with. And as Councillor Mills pointed out, people parking on pavements, it's not actually an offence. So it would be very good to have something that was more promoting considerate behaviour, that could perhaps just go into things like, the sort of free magazines that people get, or the little local parish newsletters and things, just to try and remind people that their parking does impact on other people. We could just amalgamate it all together into a toolkit that could then be distributed out to parishes once we've got it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leeming. Just to echo that, I think that's a very good recommendation, and definitely some of our parish councils have asked about, you know, trying to, like you said, educate them around parking enforcement and good parking practices and things like that. So, yeah, I would second that. Councillor Batchelor.
I mean, yes, yeah, all good ideas. I mean, what more is there to say? I mean, that's anything we can do to help encourage people to, you know, respect the scheme and park considerately in general. Obviously, you know, we'd be happy to look at doing that. I think the toolkit's a great idea. I know parishes, as we mentioned before, are going down the local highways initiative route with the county councils to try and get more areas of their towns and villages enforceable with double yellow lines, and some are even going down the privately funded route where, you know, they're not going through the bidding process, they're actually just paying upfront 100% of the cost to ensure that they get it done. So, you know, that's how serious some parishes I know are taking it. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, if you as a committee wanted to make that as a recommendation for us to look at ways we can better engage, I'm sure, you know, myself and officers are happy to look at that and, you know, and take any suggestions on board.
I think we do, don't we, Councillor Lehman?
Thank you. Yes, and I think especially when Gareth was speaking earlier about the work that was done with the launch, I should imagine that you've probably got quite a lot of material that can be reformatted to go out with this. Yeah. But it could cover the different aspects, how to do the LHI system, or just to tell people that a parish could self-fund and do it themselves. Perhaps people aren't aware of that. They could be sent the email address, how to report parking issues. We could reissue the survey, which I think, or perhaps we could send that later. I don't know. It would depend. But I genuinely think some kind of communications for positive things about considerate behaviour could also be really helpful for people in situations where there aren't, where parking enforcement isn't an option. Thank you.
So the two could be combined.
Two could be combined, yeah. And it would just be helpful for the parishes and town councils to have it all in one place, so that they know who's doing what and who to contact for which bit.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor. I'm just going to bring Councillor Milnes in, so he's indicating to speak on this. Councillor Milnes, online.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
No problem.
So, are you catching me? Yes?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
As Stephen Drew, your Vice Chair, will know, when we had the conversation about these things in reference to the Camborne 2050 group, I was very cynical about the likelihood of improving behaviour of drivers to be considerate when parking, and used an example of somebody who parked in front of a car park barrier, went and did her shopping, and then was mortified when she returned to find a dozen people trying to leave the car park on their way out of work, because this was at 5:30 in the evening. So that's one of several examples of people being completely disrespectful of any potential for controlling or encouraging considerate behaviour. So I'm just very cynical. I live across a place that is beset with such behaviour most of the time.
Thank you for that. Did you want to come back on that, Councillor Lehman, at all? Don't have to.
Councillor Mills, I live with optimism.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I was just going to have one brief, and then I'll bring Councillor Drew in, and Councillor Stobart's just indicating to speak there. So I just had a comment on the how much we're charging in fines. Essentially, it appears to me that the amount that we're charging is very good and working, because the amount of parking enforcement tickets are going down. I just wondered if you wanted to comment on whether you think it should remain the same. You're sort of happy with it as it is. I know some parish councils had asked about sort of repeat offenders, whether higher fines could be, issued. It sounds like the administration behind that might be quite difficult. But I just wondered if you would comment firstly on the fines, and whether you envisage them staying the same going forward, or things like repeat offenders. Are there other things that we could look at in that respect? Councillor Batchelor.
So I don't think we set the amount. I think that's nationally set. Well, not set by us anyway. Might not be nationally, yeah. So I think that's explained in paragraph 15 of the report. So yeah, it's not something that we as a local authority can change. I know obviously private companies that do car parking in supermarkets, for example, they can charge what they like, and they do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think us as local authorities, I think we are quite constrained by the amounts we can charge. So I'd love to charge someone that parks badly every day a lot of money, but I think we are
So as a local authority, we don't have influence over that.
I don't think so. Not yet. Anyway, again, a national issue. So if we want to add that to the list of things to lobby government for, I'm happy to.
Yeah. Thank you for answering that. So we'll go on to Councillor Stobart and then Councillor Drew. Yeah.
Chair, thank you. Super brief. So I think we haven't talked about, well, we have talked about successes because Councillor Williams talked about a success in Whittlesford. So I'd just like to think there are success stories here that we could gather up. So to act as an encouragement to parish councils and others. Yeah.
And on that, I would just emphasise where I have seeked enforcement to take place, it's been really good and responsive and so forth. So I think there are a lot of good news stories. Councillor Batchelor.
Yeah, I suppose it's subjective, isn't it? If you're the one getting the ticket, it's probably not a success because you've got a big fine. But no, absolutely, we do have hotspots, and the majority of tickets where we have seen the numbers reduce has been at these places. So we keep mentioning Whittlesford Station for one, Fulbourn as another. It does seem to be working there. So we do have the hotspots, for want of a better word. I think we are seeing an improvement there. So yeah, absolutely, we're happy to shout about that.
Lovely. Councillor Drew.
Two places. Sorry, let's start up again. In Camborne, we will be delighted to say that we've had 98 visits. So therefore, Camborne is clearly, as one of the places, as Councillor Williams pointed out, in the hotspot area. And it's quite impressive that Camborne's had 98 visits due to the fact that there is a lack of yellow lines and parking enforcement in large parts of the town. But from my understanding and all that's been talked about, we talk about why a visit would be made and how a visit would be allowed to be made. But there are two places in Camborne that have been visited, which I'd be interested to know how they qualified to be visited. So one of these would be Lancaster Gate. Lancaster Gate is one of the main roads through the town. There are no yellow lines whatsoever on Lancaster Gate. There is no parking enforcement control or anything at all. There is not even any yellow lines on any of the immediate surrounding roads. What there is at one end of Lancaster Gate is a pedestrian crossing, which is a zebra crossing with the zigzag lines. So just wondering, how did Lancaster Gate qualify for a parking enforcement visit?
Councillor Batchelor.
Pass on that one, but I imagine the reason, because I've just quickly had a look and it has been visited semi-regularly, so I imagine that it has something enforceable on it, whether it's a zebra crossing or something else. But again, I can't give you a direct answer on that. Again, I'm not sure if any of our county colleagues who manage the traffic wardens can. And if they can't, it might be a question that we'd have to take away and come back to you on. But
I mean, I'm not, in a sense, if you take it almost like as a general thing, how would a road that has no yellow lines whatsoever but does have a zebra crossing with zigzags qualify? No. Thank you.
Yeah, so.
Anyone else? I don't know if anyone else was.
Richard,
I think one of our county colleagues might. I think has his hand up.
Richard Ling.
I feel I'm just sort of feeling a silence. I'm desperately looking through Google Maps, and I'm not seeing many double yellows. Ian Reid is on the call from my enforcement team. I don't know if he knows the area a lot better than me. I do go to Camborne quite a lot, but I don't know. Do we have an answer for that, colleagues?
I am just currently looking at our mapping for the area, and I am not completely sure, to be quite honest with you.
Maybe
if
it's something we can come back to. Yeah.
Yes.
That's fine. Can I just say, I know a number of people are chipping in who aren't county council officers. Just council colleagues know, I do know the answer to my own question before I ask it. For those of you on the committee with me, you may have worked out I do tend to know the answers to my own questions before I answer them. So I'm really interested in listening to what the officers have to say. So, thank you. And if I can ask about another one in Camborne, there is a very small little road in Camborne called Woodland Walk, Woodland Walk comes off one of the main roads that goes through Great Cambourne. Woodland Walk has about 5 houses on it. It absolutely has no parking controls whatsoever. It is basically a little cul-de-sac that leads along the end of one of the woodland areas in Cambourne. There is no zebra crossing. There is no yellow lines. There is nothing whatsoever. If you were to go on Google Maps and look at Woodland Walk in Cambourne, it is basically a little offshoot on a corner. There is nothing. There is no yellow lines and navy red. You will see the point of my 2 questions when I get to my next question in a moment, which isn't about Cambourne. Is anyone able to suggest why a place like Woodland Walk, which has absolutely no parking controls whatsoever, would have been visited by the parking enforcement team?
Councillor Batchelor.
Again, pass. It's I don't know about specific situations in this regard, but it's probably safer for our county colleagues to answer. But I'd imagine they would only go there if there was something enforceable in that area. But or there was a request put in to go there. But again, I won't guess. I think it's probably better if we ask one of our colleagues to answer that.
Is that Ian wanting to come in?
Yes, I'll just pop in on this. Although there may not be any lines in the area specifically, if it is public highway, what we do also do is the enforcement of dropped curbs in the area. So it is possible that a resident might have requested enforcement of that dropped curb, hence enforcement in the area.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor, just adding to Ian's comment there, I'm looking at Woodland Walk. There is a cycleway that crosses at the end of there, so it may well that some parking was over, where the cyclists were getting across, and it is a drop curb, following on from what Ian's saying. So that could be the answer.
Okay, so the presence of yellow lines or not, or what we consider generally to be parking enforcement restrictions, whatever, is clearly not the only thing that leads to civil parking enforcement taking place. And as officers are saying there, if a resident has requested, it's possible for a visit to be done. That's great. That's absolutely great. So Cambourne had 98 visits. Northstowe has 0 visits. I very much doubt that the people of Northstowe, of which there are more than 2,500 now, have never asked for a visit. Councillor Williams earlier referred to one of our tiniest parishes. Population 100, less than 100, I honestly don't know.
If I can, Chair, Oddsy's 25 houses, but Northstowe was blank on my heat map.
Yes. So Northstowe population at the moment, I would estimate about 2,500 or so. No visits whatsoever during this period. I'm wondering if anyone can comment. Officers, please.
I think one reason might be that the majority of the roads in Northstowe are actually not public adopted highways by the public, maintained by the public expense. So effectively, the civil parking enforcement officers can't enforce on private roads, and they are effectively owned by the developer still until they're adopted by the county. Because it does look a big anomaly why we wouldn't in such a highly populated area, but I think that could well be the reason.
Okay, so we are in the process in South Cambridgeshire of building a number of new towns. We have Northstowe, where we are going to be building a new town where we're expecting a population of 25,000 or so. We know it takes a long time for such roads to be adopted. In Cambourne, we know this. Cambourne is now 25 years old. We still have sections of the town which are unadopted roads. And one of the constant conversations we are having is that those things cannot be enforced. Northstowe, we are therefore effectively following the logic of what we're saying, looking at a situation where we're building a new town and we're unable to enforce parking restrictions a long period of time. Waterbeach is about to build its new town as well. We know that's already happening. Waterbeach again, we're looking at a large population there. We are also about to build Bourne Airfield, population of somewhere in the region, say let's up to 10,000 people or so. We are also no doubt going to see further expansion. North Cambourne, when East West Rail possibly comes, will again see a large bit. what I'm getting at here, and this is where all of my questions are leading to, is what do either cabinet members or officers involved in the scheme think it may be possible to do for us to be able to communicate to residents who are moving into South Cambridge or into the new towns that we are encouraging, in terms of giving them the same access to safe parking controls as exists for the other residents of the district, because this strikes me as a rather glaring hole.
Did you want to come in here, Councillor John Williams, who'd indicated to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, unfortunately, there's no legal obligation for a developer to build a road to standards that are adoptable by the Highway Authority. And in fact, there are many roads that are still unadopted decades after they've been built because the county council would not adopt them, either because the lighting's not up to standard or the surface water drainage is not up to standard for lots of different reasons. And in fact, as you know, Chair, in our ward, we have the Windmill Estate, which is still not adopted by the county council, and it was built getting on for 8 years ago, and that's caused problems because people do park on the footpaths, do park at the junctions, and actually there's no action that we or the police can take. It depends on the developer, it depends on the ownership, there's the housing association that actually, you know, is responsible for controlling that. Can I, as a suggestion I can make, we are responsible for providing street names, aren't we? The signs that street. Could we not put on the street sign whether the road is adopted or not? That may help our residents understand, because obviously they should know if they live on an unadopted road, because they should be paying service charges to maintain that road. But clearly most people are not aware of that. They don't understand the difference between an adopted and unadopted road. But given that we are responsible for providing the name signs, the road signs, maybe we could do something on the road sign to say whether it's adopted or unadopted.
I was going to bring Councillor Batcher in as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what more to add other than that, you know, traffic enforcement officers can only enforce what is enforceable. If a road is unadopted or, you know, it's never going to be adopted, I think we're in a very difficult position. We can't send a traffic ward in there because they've got no legal basis for issuing a ticket. So, yeah, appreciate that's probably not the answer that some people living in new estates that aren't adopted want to hear, but I think that is the reality of the situation that we are in. Obviously, you know, there are deterrents, and, you know, we spoke earlier about sort of public campaigns we can run in terms of good, you know, practice around parking, considerate parking, but in terms of actual enforcement and issuing tickets, I think we are in the position where, you know, we can't send an officer somewhere because, you know, we know isn't enforceable, so they wouldn't be able to do anything. So, yeah, I think that's probably the best answer I can give on that one, I'm afraid.
I've had a few people indicating to speak on this issue. What I'm going to do is come back to Councillor Stephen Drew first, and then we'll try and round. I don't want too much repetition on it, but I'll bring the other speakers in if they still think they need to speak.
Okay, so I suppose in the sense, if I am a resident who moves into one of these areas and I'm moving an unadopted road, what can I do? What can I do? Because fundamentally, and I talk on this theme quite a few times in this chamber, if I move into an unadopted road, I don't want to hear it's not my fault as the council. I don't want to hear, unfortunately, you bought an unadopted road. I don't want to hear that. I am a citizen living in South Cambridgeshire or Cambridgeshire County area. I hold my councillors, and I'm sorry, I'll use Councillor Bygott and myself as examples. Councillor Bygott is a councillor in Northstowe. If I'm a Northstowe resident, I'm going to hold my councillor responsible for the fact there isn't parking going on. Now, Councillor Bygott, like myself in Camborne, can quite legitimately turn around and say exactly what Councillor Williams has said, Councillor Batchelor has said. But if I'm a resident, I am going to go back to Councillor Bygott, myself, Councillor Leeming, all of the councillors in here for Newtowns, and I'm going to say what can be done about it. So, to some extent, I think I would expect, as a resident in South Cambridgeshire in Cambridgeshire, that my county council, responsible for civil parking enforcement through my district councils, was doing something about this. We, as South Cambridgeshire and the area we're in, are responsible for building more new townhouses than I would say, than anywhere else in the country. This is an absolute red hot issue for residents in this area, and I don't want to be that person who sits 8 years later, as Councillor Williams said, in Fulbourn, or many years later. So I question, what can we do, what can the council do, and who should these residents go to in order to get a better service? I'm happy for that to be left as me talking.
Lovely. Okay.
If nobody wants
so
to
I've got 5 people that have indicated to speak. Can you think very carefully, is it repetition? Okay. In that case, Councillor Rippeth.
I'm hoping I might be speaking for Councillor Bradnam as well. I don't know. I'm not a mind reader. But as regards the adopted rows in Waterbeach, Newtown, Waterbeach, they are going to be adopted, and I'm quite sure that Councillor Bearpark, Councillor Bradnam and myself will continue to push and make sure that those get adopted. And I am hoping we don't need to have a sign saying this is unadopted at the moment, because we'll be pushing to get them adopted. So
Noted.
They will be great.
Yeah. Councillor Richard Williams.
Very briefly, I mean, yeah, planning issue. We shouldn't be, in my view, giving planning permission if they're not roads are not of adoptable standards, so it's almost a planning issue. I did just want to make another point, which is on a slightly different issue, just to go back to something we were talking about before, just in terms of the cost of civil parking. I mean, I think it's worth bearing in mind just the broader point here. We don't expect the police to make a profit. We invest through general taxation in the police to deter crime, and I think the same principle applies to civil parking. So we shouldn't be overly, obviously it needs to be efficiently run. We need to spend taxes wisely. But the fact that we may be subsidising it, I don't think is a problem, because that's what we do with all law enforcement.
Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back in. People ask, what can we do? And the answer is that through the Planning Committee, we can seek to maximise the amount of adoptable roads in any new development. These often are just the last 9 houses of a cul-de-sac. But
and I think
for example,
similar points
Springstead Village, we insisted that more of the roads were made adoptable than were originally on the original plan.
Thank you for noting that. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. So, taking your words on not repetition, what was said about the street names, while I like it, it has taken me some time to get them back, £250 I think for a street, so that might be quite a spendy option, but I do like the idea, because it was more about making it clear. Now, the county used to have maps that showed the ownership and actually showed what roads were adopted and what weren't. Those maps, but it used to be layered then district, because we do also have district roads, very few, a small amount. But my thing is, though, on what Councillor Drew was saying, perhaps that's something that we need to, not for this, but look at, because when you have things like Speed Watch, which is do speed, they don't hand out tickets, but letters do get wrote to people that are making offences, and I'm wondering if that's okay, we can't fine, but perhaps we could take a similar thing where you can't give someone a speeding ticket, you can give them a warning, because as Councillor Drew says, people rightly just want a resolution.
Okay, and I think that comes back to what Councillor Lehman was talking about as well, in terms of education around that as well, so they sort of link in, I think. Councillor Milnes, is there anything that you want to add very briefly, please, because I want to move on.
I imagine you do want to move on, Chair. So
thank you.
The issue of what we do on private property is very difficult, which is the essence of Councillor Drew's remarks, is that if the roads are unadopted, they are still owned by the developers or their successor organisations. So quite often these private estates have management companies who look after such things. And it's quite possible, if there's a willingness to pay for that service, to create a private parking enforcement scheme, which is quite common in, for example, supermarket car parks. You'll see signs saying got a limit to the amount of time, and somebody will issue a parking charge notice, which is effectively an invoice for the contract that you enter on. So that's a possible route for people if they want to do that. The other thing that we're looking at elsewhere is residence parking schemes, and that's one of the things that are under consideration at Waterbeach, which will allow similarly control so that only local residents are allowed to park in their own area. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, I think we will move on. So if we come to page 11, where the recommendation is, I think we have reviewed the report and made recommendations and comments on that. Thank you, Councillor Batchelor, for taking those questions. So we will move on the agenda now to the lift report. So if we come to pages 137 to 150, this is item 8 because we're taking it before item 7. So low income family tracker update. So who would like to start on that? Councillor Bygott.
Thank you. So I was just having a look at the, there's a financial calculation methodology in Appendix A, and there's a few issues with it that I wanted to raise your attention to. So basically what this is about is it's calculating a total lifetime benefit to the individuals based on how much extra pension credits or extra income we've been able to suggest that they apply for. And it uses an average life expectancy for South Cambridgeshire of 83.95. So I've popped onto the Office of National Statistics, and where that comes from, so that's a 2003 figure taken by taking the average of male and female life expectancy. But they are life expectancies at birth, and we're applying them to people of an average age of 72.39. So once you get to 72.39, the probability that you would have already died at a younger age is taken away. And so, for example, at age 65, men and women have so 20 and a half years for men, 22.8 years for women, and that actually gives you 86.65. So there's actually an underestimate in the amount from that point of view. Okay. But the other issue is that it's an average life expectancy across the whole district, and that includes people of all socioeconomic groups. Whereas if you're claiming credits, you belong to a lower socioeconomic group, and it's known that you would have a shorter lifespan. So there are two issues with the methodology, but fortunately, one is an overestimate and the other is a underestimate. So I've just been having a look at whether it's possible to get socioeconomic data by local authority, and so there's a number of tools. There's the Office of National Statistics, and there's also something produced by the Department of Health and Social Care called Fingertips Public Health Profiles, which has more data. So my suggestion is, could someone have a look at some of those statistical sources and have a look at it from that point of view? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bygott. Councillor Batchelor, did you want to?
Chris
is indicating
to
speak.
Yeah, I would say, absolutely. I'm immediately going to throw over to Chris Richards, who's our officer, who's done 100% of the work on this, and personally ran through the methodology. So I think rather than me bumble about, it might be easier if Chris just talked you through the methodology.
Chris.
And over to you, Chris.
Yeah, it is a really good point, and I think especially for life expectancy as well, there are various figures going around. So there are estimates that are up to date from this year, or ones from the census, and so on and so forth. So as you say, there was potentially an underestimate with one of those, and with all of the financial calculations in there, what I've tried to do is err on the side of caution and not kind of overestimate what our impact has been with that. And on the second point of looking at socioeconomic data, that's definitely something I can take back and look into as well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bygott, did you have any other comments on that?
No, that's great. It's just a suggestion, really, to have a look at that. Thanks.
Councillor Bradman.
I think I raised my hand. I think I was thinking that we were using a standard calculation through lift.
Okay.
And, that was what Chris was saying. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. So it's really just a comment on some of the topic areas that have been explored with LIFT. Paragraph 32, targeting community-based schemes. This is great stuff, and I think what we're seeing is examples, successes, which of course can be propagated. So maybe this is back to the how do we communicate these kind of success stories. So if I could just reflect on the kind of things that we've mentioned to parish councils, and bear in mind in my ward there is Girton Town Charity, but there are agencies, if you will, who could hugely benefit from this kind of effort. And we're trying to set up or trying to encourage parish councils and others to get engaged and to express their interest and approach Chris and his team. So I think this is golden, and this is the kind of thing we should be communicated. So if it was nicely packaged up in a way that we could easily communicate, so much the better. Just on paragraph 37 on page 144, reaction to this was, what's going on here? Why can't we get access to this data? Free school meals, however we feel about school meals, they should be just school meals, really. But free school meals and them being taken up by those who need them, and I think, well, I don't want to steal Councillor Leaming's thunder, but she did mention, I think, the pupil premium goes with free school meals. So this is very important. So how do we work with the county council, and what's the issue, and how do we resolve it?
Thank you. Councillor Batchelor.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, absolutely agree. I mean, I don't think there are any sort of negatives we've experienced so far with this particular scheme. I mean, it's been, a really, really big success story, without sort of blowing our own trumpet too much. I mean, it's probably, in terms of return for investment, I mean, it's sort of paid us and our residents over tenfold. I mean, in terms of shouting about it, I mean, I think we have been shouting quite loudly about it, to be honest. I mean, I've been on the radio a couple of times in the last weeks talking about very specific schemes that LIFT has helped with. I know we promote it in our magazines, on our website, in local media as well. But yeah, I mean, obviously, any suggestions on how to spread the word wider locally in your specific areas, I'm sure Chris and the team would want to hear about it. And I might actually ask Chris if he can talk about some of the in-person events that him and the team have held over recent weeks, because that would be, I think, quite useful for you to hear about, and in terms of the level of engagement that those have garnered.
So, shall I bring Chris in here? Would that be?
Yeah, so I completely forgot what the second question was, so it might be a good time for Chris to come in.
Yeah. And I would just add that the briefings have been excellent on this as well, that we've had as district councillors, internally. So, Chris.
I'll just touch slightly on the question about free school meals, and there was also one about shout about it, of course, just before I go on to the in-person events. Just on the free school meals, we are working with county. I think we are confident that we should be able to do something. The issue is around just getting the right safeguards in place around data sharing, because it would involve us sending kind of personal information to county council, which there is an exemption under GDPR for welfare provision for that purpose, but it's just about trying to work with them to make sure everyone's comfortable in that process. On the second one about ensuring that parishes know about it, we do plan to do a section at the next parish liaison forum on lift in general, where hopefully we'll share some more information and let kind of parish clerks and councillors know how they can get involved on a local level as well. And then just to touch on the events that Councillor Batcher mentioned as well. So these are in reference to the supporting residents at risk of loneliness and isolation. So from paragraph 22 onwards. When the report was written, no events had taken place, but since there have been 2 events that have taken place, one in Bassingbourn and one in Melbourne today. So the Bassingbourn one had 18 attendees, which was we're really happy with. We had 2 people identified as likely to be eligible for attendance allowance. And also the Melbourne one today had 38 people come to it, so all over the age of 70, to the Cozy Corner, which is a community hub there. So we are promoting both attendance allowance, household support fund, but also those local bits of support there in terms of attending their community hub on a regular basis as well.
Brilliant. Councillor Stobart.
Yes, and thank you for those comments respectively. I think there's a kind of, well, I detect this in Girton, there's a little barrier to overcome in the sense of doing something that works and it being demonstrated to the community. So I think there are people who talk in the village who we need to encourage to talk some more to make this happen, and I think they'll gain a benefit. So perhaps it's down to the district councillors to actually work with people in the village, the parish councillors and others, to keep promoting it until we have a success, and that demonstrates how it works. So sorry, I'm giving myself a job.
Agreed. Yeah.
But I think local members could really help with this.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. I think we'll move on to Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that what this report shows is how extremely well we've used a piece of data about income, and we're using it to cross-fertilise across all of our communities working to look at, whether people have got the right amount of income, whether there's more that they could tap into. But it's looking at whether they've got children, whether they need help with that, whether we need to provide, assistance with school meals, that sort of thing. That whole business about loneliness and being warm, and what I'm trumpeting, I think we shall say, is how well this has worked across it means all the departments are meshing together and working in a really coherent way. And I just wanted to ask, is this also linking into people who we encounter who are at risk or are getting into the habit of hoarding? Because I don't know if it's linked, and if there is a link, but maybe that's something that happens as well. And I just wanted to check that sort of side of things is being linked into this as well.
Councillor Batchelor.
Yeah, I'm going to throw it to Chris on that one. I don't think we've done anything specifically on hoarding so far with the information that the programme gives us. But I might ask Chris if the information that we get is, can we identify people that do suffer with that?
Chris.
So we haven't done anything specifically to do with hoarding on through the LIFT programme. I know there are different things across the council to help people that do hoard. I think with something like hoarding, it will depend on the data that we get. So sometimes we have to look at proxies through whether they're claiming a disability benefit, or would obviously indicate that they're more likely to be disabled, or things like that. But I can't think off the top of my head a proxy that we could employ that would indicate that someone might be more likely to hoard. But it's definitely something that I could take away to have a think about.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got Councillor Richard Williams next.
Thank you, Chair. It's a good report, and obviously a very useful and successful initiative. I just had a couple of slightly niche questions, just in terms of my sort of understanding partly of the data, but also the way it's presented. So just when, and it really relates to the issue about what's claimed and what's actually been awarded when we're presenting financial benefits, and whether we're presenting the value of claims or whether we're presenting the value of awards. So just to give an example, paragraph 19, talking about the healthy start uptake, talks about officers contacting residents, and it says the total claim value of the HSF awards completed was 15,070. And you fast forward to paragraph 21, and that figure is added to the uplift in healthy start claims. So are we comparing the same things there? Because to me, the way I read paragraph 19 was we were talking about the value of the claims, and the claims may have been accepted or rejected. So are we talking about awards or claims?
I'll come over to Chris on that. Those are awards. So I'll look to change that word just to be more specific on that one. But for household support funds, those are applications that officers at the council complete. And so we would then get an email to confirm that it's either been rejected or accepted for those people, and we didn't get any rejections. So we haven't had any through LIFT campaigns so far.
Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Judith Rippeth.
Talking about making sure that everybody knows about this, and by the way, it's excellent and well done, and please keep going with it. Thank you very much. What about adverts on bus stops? Would that be a possibility? Could we, liaise over that? Because that's somewhere where you're just going about your daily life and you catch a bus and you just see things whilst you're waiting for a bus, like to advertise, are you claiming what you need? Could you be getting everything you're entitled to? I mean, some more pithy advert than that, obviously, but just wondered about that as a location.
I'm going to come to Councillor Batchelor first. I know Chris wants to just come in on this. Yeah.
Sure, pick up the bit. Yeah, I mean, obviously we're open to all ideas. I think so far it's fair to say they've been very targeted in how we've approached this. I mean, that is one of the sort of benefits of the system. We can very accurately see who, should be always eligible to claim benefits. That hasn't been so far. So I know our sort of campaign has been very targeted so far. Yeah, so, I mean, it's something I'm sure we would consider as in a more sort of blanket advert around, making sure people claim. But I think the point of having this tool is that we can, use data that is available to us and actually see, who those people in South Cambridgeshire are that should be claiming that might not be at the moment. So, yeah, I mean, I'll let Chris expand on that. But
Chris, yeah.
Yes, and we did do some bus stop adverts, not last winter, but the winter before, alongside a general cost of living campaign. And what we actually found was it was the Facebook adverts that actually delivered the best value for money in terms of, at that point, it was to direct people to our cost of living support websites. And we didn't see much of an uptake from the bus stop adverts. I think the benefit of LIFT is being able to target exactly who we can see is eligible for these benefits, and not only that, but then track whether they have gone on to apply for them as well. So I definitely wouldn't rule out doing bus stop adverts in the future for sure, and it's something we could look at.
Thank you for that. Lovely. So we've got Councillor Lehman next.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered whether I was sort of looking at the list on paragraph 41, and it talks about the households that we've actually we've been able to reach. I was sort of looking at where most of the income has gone and the sort of demographic of the residents that would involve, and predominantly it's the work we've done at this point in time is targeting older people, which is brilliant, especially after the winter fuel cuts and things. It's really essential. But I'm wondering what work we could do to target children and working age adults, because historically, in the last 20 years, those groups, especially sort of working age adults in poverty, it sort of increased significantly over this period of time. So I wondered if there was anything that you would be able to do to target that particular different demographics. I can see the free school meals thing, which is obviously to sort out with county, and we've spoken about that already. But beyond that, I wonder if there's anything else you could say. Thank you.
Councillor Batchelor.
Yeah, thank you. And obviously on top of those schemes you mentioned as well, there is the Healthy Start scheme as well, which is quite a new one, which is targeted at families that have children up to the age of 4, who might not realise they could be in receipt of benefits for support with looking after their toddlers, babies. But yeah, so that is quite a new one that is getting quite a lot of traction, albeit that a lot of the funding comes via the NHS. We're just sort of the conduit to helping them claim that. So we can't claim the credit for it, but yeah, it's so I think we are trying to target as many demographics. But the good thing about the technology is that there isn't really a limit into who we can look at. So any suggestions about groups that you think we should be using the tool to look at will be greatly received. But yeah, Chris, I don't know if there's anything that he might be able to add to that.
Chris?
Yeah, just to add to it. So I think it's just the nature of pension credit in that it goes so vastly underclaimed. We knew that before we even started. It's one of the most underclaimed benefits, and that was always going to be one of the drivers of the biggest income gain for residents. There is the possibility within Lift to model people that are eligible for universal credit and not claiming it, and we have looked at doing something on that, but the claim rates are actually quite high, so there aren't many misclaims there. But it is something that we'll continually look at, and if there are people that are eligible and not claiming, we'll look into that as well. As Councillor Batchelor mentioned as well, we've done the Healthy Start campaign, the Free School Meals campaign, which we hope to do, but also the reduced water tariff campaign. I know on the report it says a future campaign, but since I've written it, we've sent the first 100 letters out, and the vast majority of those people are working age adults, mostly with children as well. So we are kind of capturing there, again, those working age people.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you very much. I'm also very, very pleased to hear that it's not an either or scenario. It's very much an and situation, which is great for reducing poverty in our area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. I just wanted to agree with some of what others have said about, I think this has been a really positive thing that's worked very well, and the engagement has been very good. Just as the conversation and debate's been going on to sort of more how we sort of consult or get more people involved, I don't think we should ever underestimate as well, particularly when it comes to pension and when to fuel payments, how targeting the generation below is so very, very important. Because a lot of people that aren't claiming is because perhaps they are having cognitive impairment, and they're more reliant on that generation below. And I think that's something that is difficult, but we need to try and grapple with, because quite often it's older people that are struggling. Either they don't have the capability, they might not be online, what have you, but it's trying to get them to accept help. And as somebody with, I won't say my parents are aging, my in-laws don't think will mind if I say them aging, you do get to that point in life, and it can be very difficult to accept help. But sometimes your children are a little bit tougher with their parents than maybe the council can be, so they might be good allies in making sure they get the support they need.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Did you want to comment on that at all?
No, yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, obviously care companies as well, carers. It's worth, just making them aware of what is available to some of the people in their care. So, yeah, absolutely agree.
Okay. Do we have any other speakers on this item? I can't see anyone indicating to speak. So, yeah. Yeah. So I think the committee are happy if we come to the recommendation on page 137 that we've scrutinised the report and made comments on it. So I was just, given that everyone's happy with that, I was going to see if anyone wanted a quick 5-minute break before we come on to the next item. Yeah? Okay. So we'll come offline just for 5 minutes and then we'll all meet back to start on the last item, substantive item. Okay, so we will come on to the next agenda item, which is item 7, pages 119 to 136, and this is on KPI methodology review. Who would like to start on this one? Councillor Richard Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've just got two points just in terms of the changes to KPIs. So the first one I'm going to refer to, I think, is on page 126 of my printed agenda. So it's Appendix A and it's about planning. Now, I know this has been discussed many times, and when I was on this committee 5 years ago, we talked about this, but I am going to raise it again. Just in terms of our reporting of percentage of applications that are decided within the statutory time frame, the proposed KPI change, like the current one, talks about 13 weeks or 8 weeks, or an agreed or under an agreed extension. I really think we should disaggregate extensions because it's much more open and it gives a much more accurate picture of what's going on, because an application, like there's one in my ward, which is a full application, was submitted last November. It's still not been decided. We're way past the statutory deadline. But of course, there have been extensions, which is perfectly legitimate. It's perfectly fine. But it is taking quite a long time. So I really think when we're giving our KPIs, we might want to add caveats about the reasons why there's an extension, who requested it. That's absolutely fine. I really think we need to disaggregate that. Just to give a further example, I got 4 in my weekly planning list. I checked this week 4 full applications in my ward, many more, but 4 are identified as full applications. 2 of them are significantly outside the time and are reliant on extensions. So I think we should disaggregate. My second point, different issue, and this is on page 1.
So let's take that first, Richard. Sorry,
sure.
We'll take that first, and then I'll come back to you. So I'll come to Councillor John Williams in the first, since we have got Toomey online, I think. Did you want to pass over to Toomey on it, or are you happy with it?
No, I'm happy to pass over to Toomey.
Fine. Toomey, did you want to come in on that point?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can, clearly.
I mean, the way we work now, extensions of time is not something we rely on, but there are some cases that do need that, and we only use it as and when it's required. So, obviously, I would like to discuss with Councillor Williams what the specific cases are to see why they're taking that long, but that happens.
Thank you for that, Councillor Toomey Hawkins. Richard Williams.
Just to say, I'm not saying anybody's done anything wrong. I completely accept the fact that there are reasons why that happens, and perfectly legitimate reasons. I just think in terms of the transparency, the way we present our data, it would be better for us to be transparent about the number of cases where we're using them, caveated as it may be. I just think that would be good in terms of openness. So I'm not criticising, I'm just saying I think we should be more open about it.
The recommendation is to break that down. Yeah. Councillor John Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to point out that it does explain in the summary why we do this. It's basically because this is the way it's done nationally, so we can make comparisons against other councils and against the national guidelines. But I'm happy to have to look at this to see if we can identify separately those extensions. But I wouldn't want to change these KPIs because otherwise we wouldn't be able to compare ourselves against other councils and the national guidelines.
Councillor Richard Williams.
Very happy if it's done separately. I don't mind. I just think it's good in terms of transparency somewhere. I think it'd be something that would be good to look at.
Lovely.
National, we are comparing ourselves, using the national KPIs. It might be possible to break it down, but it might be additional work, which frankly, there's time that's involved in breaking things down and becoming even more, more specific. But yes, we're as open as we possibly can as things stand, but we can have a look at that.
Thank you. Councillor Richards, Richard Williams has got a second point.
I did have a second point. I'll be briefer on this one. It's page 128 of the printed pack. We're proposing to remove from the suite of KPIs staff turnover and staff sickness, the explanation being that it's reported to employment and staffing. I did have some concerns about that. I take on board the fact that it's reported to employment and staffing, but having it as a KPI does make it more easily accessible. It makes it more prominent. You don't have to dig around in the papers for employment and staffing. And I mean, I would have to note that, we're trialling the 4-day week. One of the reasons why we're doing that is, the argument is that it will help the turnover and these things. So it just seems odd to me that we would take away this measure from somewhere where it's prominent and just put it somewhere where it's significantly less prominent.
Councillor John Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it couldn't be more prominent in employment and staffing. I mean, it's a standard item on the agenda. It is a full report, so it goes into a lot more detail than we could possibly put in a KPI summary. And it's the right place to be considered, because that's where the members with the expertise sit. I don't wish to denigrate this committee, but at the end of the day, we do need to be properly scrutinised by people who have an understanding of HR, statistics and data, etc. And as I say, at least we can, on employment and staffing, we can give a full report. Whereas if it's included in the KPIs, you will just get a summary, and it may not be a full explanation of what you're seeing. And you will then have to go to employment and staffing for that full explanation. Whereas if it's at employment and staffing, that's the place where you start. And as I say, it is a standing item on the agenda, and therefore I don't agree that it's going to be hidden in any way. In fact, the opposite's going to happen. And in fact, it already is discussed on employment and staffing at every employment and staffing quarterly meeting.
Councillor Richard Williams.
Just a quick comeback. I'm more thinking about it really in terms of a member of the public. I mean, members of the public, the KPIs, they're front-facing, they're the kind of thing, a resident would look at if they want an assessment in a simple way of how the council is performing. They're unlikely to be digging through committee papers. So I take the point about the expert member scrutiny and employment staffing. I think that's absolutely fine. But just in terms of from a member of the public's perspective, I think not having it as a KPI does make it less readily accessible to your average resident.
Councillor Williams, did you want to comment on that at all?
Well, as I say, I think if you look at paragraph, it's very useful actually. If you look at paragraph 17, where we have a Venn diagram, which and one of the things we want to do, and what we will be doing, is to separate our operational KPIs from our strategic KPIs. Whereas at the moment they're all jumbled up in one table. And I think this, to put this into context, we are looking. It is an operational KPI, and therefore that KPI should be dealt with by the committee that deals with staffing and employment.
You want to come in on this point, Councillor Heather Williams?
Yes, please, specifically to this. So I'd just like to remind, and I think this would help all members, about our committee structure. Okay, so we have council, cabinet, scrutiny, governance committees, regulatory committees, joint committees, and then we have advisory committees. Employment and Staffing Committee is not a scrutiny committee. It is a governance committee. In the same way that audit and corporate governance is a governance committee. Now, for example, the budget is financial, but it doesn't go through audit because it comes through scrutiny. And that's because this is the overview and scrutiny function in our committee structure. So coming back to Councillor Richard Williams' point, to remove it and put it into a governance committee, that does not enable the scrutiny element. that is a governance committee, not a scrutiny one. So by taking those KPIs out, you are actually removing it from scrutiny in our current governance structure.
Okay. I think the point has been made by both Councillor Williams, to consider that. Did you have anything to add, Councillor John Williams? You're happy with that?
No, I think we've debated this.
Lovely. Councillor Richard Stobart.
Chair, thank you. My first point is really a comment on the nature of some of the KPIs. And I'd just like to use as an example page 128 and a couple of the KPIs, SH332, emergency repairs completed in 24 hours, and ES430, percentage of fly tips cleared within 10 working days. So I think any KPI which is a relative measure, in other words, it's a percentage, it's the proportion of, is evidently more helpful than one which is absolute. Sometimes you need to have the absolute because there isn't a point of comparison. But there is wrapped up in these two KPIs, in a sense, a fixed target, 24 hours. So I'm asking the question, why have we enshrined 24 hours in particular? In the case of the fly tips, 10 working days. I know there are some parishioners, I can think of some, who think 2 days is too long. How have we settled on these? Are these norms? Are these national standards? And then if I could just park that one for a second and come round onto the strategic.
Shall we take that first?
Okay.
Or Mr. Ledger, maybe?
Certainly, I believe in relation to emergency repairs within 24 hours, I believe that is a kind of the nationally accepted format. Although I think Peter Campbell will be able to confirm or correct me there. So you may want to go back to that. In relation to the fly tips within 10 working days, I would need to just go and double check that.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I'll just very briefly bring in Peter Campbell just to clarify that point.
Yeah, sure. So the emergency repairs, as Kevin says, is adopted nationally. I think it's evolved from one of the old best value indicators in the old days. It's now one that's used nationally through our benchmarking clubs. And is also, because of that, we've adopted it as part of the contractual agreement that we've got with mayors. We also have another category of urgent repairs, which is unusual for us, which is a high standards service. For the real, the real urgent cases, we deal with those within 4 hours. We don't report on those in this form because we're one of the very few people who do that.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stobart.
So if I might ask a follow-up on that. So if 10 days, for example, was based on a national criterion, do we have, in a sense, shadow KPIs that may track 12 and 8 hours? Do we keep that kind of data? And would it be wise and helpful for us to do that? I mean, in respect of repairs to the houses.
So I'll come back to Peter Campbell.
Yeah, so yes, Councillor. So we have a whole suite of additional management information which we keep, much of which we report to through our tenants group. But we provide the highlight reports, if you like, the boiled down version as part of the corporate KPIs.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stobart.
And given that, Chair, could we interrogate those from time to time as scrutiny?
I mean, I assume that they could be requested to come to scrutiny and be scrutinised accordingly. Any other comments on that, Councillor Williams?
No, I haven't got any comments.
Okay. Lovely. Councillor Stobart, you had another.
Just another couple of things. One brief. In the presentation of the KPIs, I think where there's been a revision, there's a very nice account of why that KPI has been formulated. It would be helpful, I think, for every KPI to have that kind of, I hesitate to use the word, but I think you understand what I mean, a narrative around the KPI, so that when we do get into debates or reflections about KPIs, there is a piece of text which actually describes what the KPI is. So I suppose I'm appealing for that. It may exist already, but if it were more prominent, that would be...
Let's take that now. Councillor John Williams, the more narrative information on the KPIs.
Okay, can I ask Kevin about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly in the background, we do kind of have definitions for each of our KPIs that we report on. So that is something that we could look to make more available.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stobart.
Chair, I just have one more thing,
yeah,
if that's okay. So I'm going to page 134 and the top of that. So it's strategic indicator 19A, Latin 2, income generated through the planning performance agreement process. Now, we were just lauding those KPIs which are relative. In other words, you know, we're at some proportion of the ideal, if you will. But this is a kind of just a number, presumably annual income. And the planning performance agreements are so important in the sense of they do help the relationship between the planning process and developers. And the more of these we have for the bigger developments, the better. And it's indicative of perhaps a developing cooperative atmosphere between planners and developers, which I think we found is beneficial. So why not have income generated? Yes, but proportion of planning performance agreements as a proportion of the total possible for larger developments. Wouldn't that also be a useful indicator?
Councillor John Williams.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think we need to go back to what these KPIs are for, and in particular what the strategic KPIs are for. And they are a check against our corporate plan. And so they are inevitably, top level. They're not there to delve into the operational situation or behind that particular KPI. We could have, I'm sure, we could have tens of more detailed KPIs behind every strategic KPI. But, it becomes to the point, well, where do you draw the line? And when it comes to a strategic KPI, the line has got to be the top level figure. Now, if you want more information, sure, we can go and find that, but I would suggest that we would not want to do that on a regular basis. If for no other reason, then simply offer us time to produce the data behind, to produce that sort of data that lies behind that strategic KPI. I mean, the KPI is income generated through the, planning performance agreements. That is a strategic target for us, it's not an operational target for the planning service.
Councillor Stobart, did you have another, or got to come back on that?
I'm just going to comment. So I wouldn't take issue. The fact that there is an assessment of how we're doing with planning performance agreements lying in the background. I have to say, if that's been selected as a strategic number, I wouldn't disagree. But to have another number kind of at the layer below would be welcome. And is there necessarily a link? So are the strategic indicators supported by a bunch of, if you will, less strategic indicators? I'd leave it there because I think the comment from Councillor Williams is robust and sensible, but I would like to feel that we were tracking this somewhere.
Yeah, okay. On this point, or I'll bring you in a bit later. Yeah. So we've got Councillor Tom Bycott next.
Thank you. So, members of the committee will recall that in previous meetings, I've oh, yeah, no, it's on. Is that better? Yeah. So, members of the committee will recall that on several occasions in the past, I've mentioned the issue of seasonality in our data, and I'm really, really, really pleased to see that actually quite a few of our KPIs are going to have this seasonality taken into account in the future. So, so well done to the team for bringing that in. If you look at Appendix C, you'll see actually just how effective that is. There's an example 1, which uses year-to-date figures, an example 2, which uses the exact monthly figures, and then an example 3, which uses the rolling 12-month format, which is the form of seasonal variation that I mentioned. And you can see, just by looking at those 3 graphs, just how much more useful graph 3 is compared to the other 2. So we really weren't in a position to make any decisions at all about using the example 2. So that chart was actually what was in our previous set of KPIs that we looked at. But you can actually see already, so once you take out the seasonality, you're left with the trend, and it's actually the trend that you're interested in. So, and what the trend says in example 3 is that over 12 months, we've the proportion of waste sent for reuse, recycling, and composting has dropped by 0.75%. Now, I don't think that's probably gone on for more than several years, because the otherwise example 2 would be a different shape. But it would be really, really interesting to actually see this plotted. And I think we do it, what, for 3 or 4 years when we look at the KPIs. It'd be really, really interesting to actually see this trend plotted for that period. And it would also be really interesting. So one of the sort of responses that I've had when I've raised this in the past is that when we entered a shared waste partnership with Cambridge City, we then took on an authority with very different levels of recycling behaviour. And it would be really interesting to see what that trend looks like from the point where we became a shared waste authority, and just see, so we can make some ongoing decisions about whether that trend is going up or down. Thank you.
Councillor John Williams.
I don't know if Kevin wants to make a point about this, but can I just say that what we are looking here is a proportion of the total waste collected. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the percentage, that the actual tonnage of waste going for recycling is going down. It's the proportion of the total that's going down. And I understand one of the reasons for that is partly due to packaging, but I don't know whether we have Bodie on who can look at, or Kevin knows the reasons for it.
Yes, I'm happy to
sorry,
come
I
on.
didn't see him there. Yeah, come in, Bolo. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll just try and address quite a few of the points. Just starting with the second one. There is a difference in performance between a rural area, more rural area like South Cambs versus a more urban area like Cambridge City. We have tried in the past to break down the figures, but it's not very straightforward because there are some vehicles that collect across the border. So, for instance, Cambridge City has a high proportion of flats rather than South Cambridgeshire, and generally flats don't have gardens. This particular parameter is recycling and composting is a lot heavier green waste, so it contributes quite a big proportion to the overall figure. So if it was a South Cambs figure only, no doubt it would be higher. It's not so easy to separate it. I'm not sure we can report on a regular basis the figures for South Cambs or for City separately. To the question of recycling, this is a trend nationally. The figures have stagnated across the whole of the country at about 44% on average over the last 3-4 years. That's primarily because, like I think Councillor Williams mentioned, there's a huge onus now on packaging manufacturers to reduce the weight of packaging, so to make it lighter and more recyclable. So a lot of the materials that are being recycled now, plastic bottles, plastic containers, glass, they're a lot thinner. They're not as thick. So therefore, the weight of materials we're collecting is a lot smaller. The volume is still the same, but the weight is smaller. Hence why recycling rates have gone down. So it's a national picture, and that's why the figures have stagnated and in some cases gone down. The difference will be noticeable when we begin to collect food waste on a weekly basis, because this can add anything between 5 and 10% to the overall recycling and composting rates.
Thank you for that, Bode. Councillor Tom Bygott.
Yeah, thank you. No, I'm really quite happy with that answer. I think for the reasons that Bode mentioned, it wouldn't really be possible to separate the statistics between South Cambs and the city, so that's quite reasonable. And as we go forward into the changing of the council areas that the government has initiated, that wouldn't be that useful anyway, because we will soon be in a wider area anyway. But I think my main point is that if we can look back at the trend for the period that we've actually been together as a waste authority.
Yeah, I see
so
what
we
you mean.
can see for as long as that history, and then compare that to the national trend to see, are we just exactly mirroring the national trend, or are we going up or down compared to the national trend?
Yeah, noted. Yeah, and I think that's been recognised. Yeah, thank you for that. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. So just on the report as a whole, Councillor Rich Williams mentioned about extensions of time, and this is something that I feel that we've gone round in circles about for the whole of time that I've been at South Cambs, and it's not just ourselves. I remember, I think originally it was raised by Councillor Peter Fain many years ago. I completely take the point that some sites do require extensions of times for the applicant or whatever it may be. Consultations sometimes have to be rerun, etc. But I think there is also the need for us to be able to see what is actually happening and if things are being done in a timely manner. And I think different things have been tried, but it doesn't replace, in my mind, and I think others, that we do need to see the breakdown. That's not to be critical, but see how reliant we were. Because at one point, we were very reliant on extensions of time, and my understanding is that situation has improved. But there's, we can't really work and can't scrutinise on hearsay and commentary. Now, we could have, as Councillor Rich Williams said, a breakdown where it says at the applicant's request, because we need more information, or because we just simply don't have the capacity or time. Perhaps it's a very dominating or large strategic site. But we need that to be able to judge whether how the planning department is performing from this function, in my view. And also the fly tipping, we sort of have the 10-day in that KPI. Other councils do sort of 95%. I think we've got one council that's 95% within a day. Now, I'm not suggesting that South Cambs can achieve that, because that's a very high standard. But I was just wondering if 10 days to respond to fly tipping, whether we could perhaps be a bit more ambitious than that. Because the problem is, with some of the things that are getting dumped, when I see the longer it's in the natural environment, the more likely we are to have problems of that, contaminant getting into the stream, and the less likely we are to have the evidence to be able to prosecute people for it. So there's that. And then just finally, I understand that we need to ask for things that help us scrutinise the council, the administration, and everything else. And I can understand the sort of separating of the more policy-driven stuff, which is the cabinet, and what's officers and that operational day-to-day. But I think both are important for this body and the scrutiny of the council. I think that's general consensus over the years. But I don't think a lack of officer time available to provide that document, given what the council is doing and 20% of the capacity is gone, is an acceptable reason. And I think members should be mindful that that should not be. We should be able to ask for the information that we need.
Thank you for that. So I'm going to, I think the planning issue has been sort of answered and addressed by Richard Williams. I'm going to come over to Bode on the fly tipping issues. Lovely.
Thank you, Chair. I think I just wanted to state that even though we have a target of 10 days, in most cases, by far majority of the cases, we do clear fly tips within 2 or 3 days. This actual parameter is measured from the date the fly tip is reported. Quite often, we can't go and clear it straight away because we first have to establish that it's not on private land. So that in itself may take a few days to establish. But although we have a target of 10 days, which is not statutory, we do beat that target in the majority of the time. So it's quite it's an ambitious target. Not all councils actually have that target, but in most cases we don't take up to 10 days.
Councillor Heather Williams.
Yeah, I just think that fly tipping, it's something that really irritates our residents. We were talking about CPA and parking earlier on irritating people. And other councils do seem to be able to do it earlier than us. So it's great if we're meeting that target, but perhaps we need a bit more of a stretch target and trying to get that dealt with quicker, because I know when it comes in my patch, it's not quite as swift as I would like.
Thank you for that. We'll move on to Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a very broad question, first of all. These KPIs have always had mysterious numbers on them, AH211, AH246. Why? What are these things? And do we need to keep this? Is this a sort of legacy from a long time ago? Could we rename these KPIs to something that matches the corporate plan?
Mr. Ledger.
Yeah, you are right in your assumption in thinking that there's some legacy there as to why those particular reference numbers are in place. For example, I think AH dates back from a time when we used to refer to our affordable homes department. So that was a long time ago. You're right. There's probably about time that we kind of consider whether there is a more up-to-date referencing system that we could use. I've got to admit that until now we've not done that because it's kind of done a job, but it could be seen as a little bit confusing as to what the origin of those references is. So happy to look at that.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. I've got another question, two things that are fairly similar actually. They're to do with KPI figures that have shifted. So there is the wonderful old chestnut, which is the reletting housing stock, which we've talked about so many times over various scrutiny meetings, and it has been reduced. We did have a target of 17 days, which we all decided was impossible. Page 128, thank you. But we have moved it to 32 days, and I wondered why we'd chosen 32 days. What was the sort of thinking behind picking 32 as a target?
Councillor John Williams, do you want to... Is Peter Campbell on still?
Yes, I'm still here. So yes, so it's quite simple. That was the we're in a benchmarking group called Housemark, which is run by the Chartered Institute of Housing, and the 32 days is the top quartile for our peer group.
Thank you for that. Councillor John Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As you all know, we have accepted for some time now that the target that we had was actually unattainable and was way below what other councils were able to achieve. But to be quite frank with you, the reason why we haven't changed it until now is because we didn't want it confused with the 4-day week trial, and to be and given that change from 17 to 32, we didn't want people to use that as a weapon against us for the 4-day week. So now the 4-day week trial has finished, we feel comfortable in changing it.
Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. So, if I'm reading it correctly, it talks about 39 days and below of being in the top quartile, but 32 is the top quartile for our sort of cohort of similar peers. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
I think so. Peter, do you want to comment on that?
I think that's right. I don't have the house marking benchmark information in front of me. I will check that and inform you if it's any different from you've been informed.
Thank you, Peter, because I definitely want us to aim for the top quartile. That seems very sensible.
I think thinking about it, what it might be is that the top quartile for the benchmarking group also changes from quarter to quarter.
Oh, I see.
So it's not been a static figure. So I think 32 days was an annual benchmark, but it might be that 39 was the last quarter's benchmark, which is over the Christmas months, which extends the timescale, of course. If it's any different, I'll get back to you.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful. And a similar thing, which is for the recycling rates. That's on page 129, and that is ES 418. We've chosen a target of, where is our target here? 49. Our target, our thing at the moment is 49%, but we've chosen our target of 52%. Now, we're doing that as a stretch target, I guess, but I'm just wondering where 52 has come from as a percentage. Thank you.
Shall I bring Bode in on that? Bode, are you able to?
Thank you, Chair. The target was 52% before. What the comment here is proposing is to change that to 50% to reflect the national trends. So 52 was based on previous practice, like I explained before, that recycling rates were generally going higher. Now they have stagnated. So the proposal to make it 50% is just to make it more realistic. It's still a stretch target, but then we can revisit that perhaps once we start weekly food waste collections as well.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lehman.
My apologies, sorry. Yeah, so we've changed it to 50. Our current rate is 49, and that's a... I'm sorry?
You continue, Councillor Lehman.
Yes, sorry. Thank you. So our current performance rate is 49, and it's a stretch to get to 50, and that would be the top. That would be within the top quartile. It would be beyond the top quartile, looking at the figures that we can see here. So it would still be a significant stretch target. Thank you.
Bode.
Thank you. No further comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to Councillor Anna Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if on the strategic targets that we have in Appendix B, whether as these are developed, whether we'll get a little more narrative on them, or is that the intended format? I mean, it does say...
Well, Councillor Stobart's point was it? Yeah.
We're continuing to look at collection methods to see how these can be reported going forward. So obviously it looks to me as if this is a work in progress. Can I just confirm that is the case?
Well, you can confirm it with Councillor John Williams. I think you said essentially the data is there in the background previously, yeah? The narratives. Yeah.
So this is just kind of setting out the broad intention in terms of those indicators that we will be reporting on, and when it gets to the Q1 performance report, at that point there will be kind of the more fleshed out version with kind of that additional level of detail included.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Chair, the second thing I just wanted to raise was that earlier it was asserted that we have lost 20% of our capacity, and we haven't. Our officers are working 100% of the work in 80% of the time.
Thank you for noting that. Let's not have a, let's not. Yeah, okay. We'll leave that there, I think, and move on. So.
Sorry,
Okay.
Chair.
Yeah.
Chair,
Yeah.
you've raised
yeah. I think I said we'll leave it there. Thank you both for your comments, but we'll leave it there. So, Councillor Anna Bradden, did you have anything else on the documents? No, thank you. Councillor Stephen Drew.
Okay, lovely, thank you. There's a number of points earlier in the report. I'm looking on page 120, and it says feedback from member workshops, and there's a number of things on here. I was wondering if I could have a bit of sort of narrative and explanation about how, either from Councillor John Williams or from one of the officers, how they felt that member input to the reviewing of these KPIs was helpful, how that members attending the workshop and how members replying to the survey, how that kind of helped the thinking that led to the outcomes that we have.
Councillor John Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Well, clearly, as says in the report, we're very grateful for members to respond in the workshops, and indeed also this committee over the years has made comments on the KPIs, and they've also been taken into account. It's very subjective sometimes as to how much detail members want on the performance of the council, and as I've said, what we're now trying to do is to separate the operational data from the strategic data to help us all better understand two things. First of all, whether or not we're meeting our corporate plan, and on the other hand, how the council is performing in its day-to-day operations. So it's been very useful, the feedback that we've had from the member workshops and indeed from this committee about how we should go about reporting on our key performance indicators, whether those key performance indicators are actually delivering what's required, and I say also helping us to devise basically two sets of KPIs, one for strategy and one for operations. So yes, I mean, thank you very much for the input of all members to this process.
Excellent, thank you. Now we can go to point 7 on page 120. I know that in point 7 it references the corporate peer challenge. I'm just wondering if I can have a bit more information about how it would be your view, Councillor Williams, that what is being done in this review meets the, should we say, the expectations placed on us as a council through that corporate peer challenge?
Well, the corporate peer challenge basically told us what we knew really, and that is that the KPIs weren't focused on delivering the corporate plan. They were more about the operational performance of the council, and it was very useful for them to focus our attention on that fact, which is why, as I say, we have now developed a set of strategic KPIs, some of which were the operational KPIs, but also some new KPIs to help us ensure that we are keeping in line with our corporate plan, our 5-year corporate plan.
Okay, great. I just have a couple more things in that regard. One maybe is an observation, but you may want to comment or not. It strikes me that when any organisation, whether it be the council or not, review their KPIs and then produce those KPIs in a report for, in this case, the Scrutiny Overview Committee to look at, or other committees, that what it will do is it will influence the dialogue, it will influence the discussion. And to some extent, by having these slightly different KPIs, maybe focus on slightly different areas, the discussions that take place within our committee will be influenced to focus more on the council's core strategies and focus more on the delivery. I often talk about, what it is that residents want. So my understanding really is that what will come out of this is perhaps a change to some extent of the way our dialogue is, which will allow us to focus much more on the things that you've talked about. I would assume that is, you would agree?
Well, I would just say that actually this change helps us do both. It helps us focus on our corporate plan and the financial implications that has for the medium-term financial strategy, but also enables us to look at the day-to-day operation of this council to ensure we are delivering for our residents.
Okay. And just finally to round off and just thinking about what some other councillors have said, I would assume, Councillor Williams, that if it turns out that it is the view of the committee that there is something specific and significant that is missing, or there is something that we feel is not maybe providing exactly what we want, that we are able to continue to provide you and officers with our thoughts for possible ongoing tweaks as may be necessary.
Goes without saying. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Okay, I'll just see if we've got any other speakers. I don't think we have. Councillor Stobart, did you want to come in quickly there?
Chair, thank you. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to add a few comments to the comments Councillor Bygott made about Appendix C, I think, and the timescales over which we view data. And I think that this particular example does deserve that what I call very long filter, that covers a period of years. But there are some KPIs where we might want to take a kind of more seasonal perspective and see how the variation is perhaps season by season. This might apply to, for example, the green bins. So there are things, and I think there's a possibility using these techniques to simply choose any timescale we want according to the KPI. So I think that's just really kind of a technical note, and might be worth a comment, but I just wanted to say.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's been noted, I think, yeah. So I think if we draw this item to a close now and come to the recommendations, I think we have scrutinised the report, and we're happy with the recommendations in front of us, noting the things that various committee members have suggested as a result. So is the committee happy with that? Agreed. So we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the work programme. Item 9, pages 151 to 166. The work programme is as noted, and Councillor Drew and myself will continue to look at things to come on the work programme. We're hoping to have it more populated by the September meeting for councillors on the committee to look at. But I was also just going to request that members keep bringing things forward to the scrutiny committee. If there are things that you think that we should be looking at and we're not, or things that you think should be on the agenda, please contact Councillor Drew or myself. So did anyone have any questions on the work programme? Yeah, when we get to the dates, I think. Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. We've just spent quite a significant amount of time cross-party just discussing how important the KPIs are to review our performance.
Yeah.
I was disappointed that we didn't have them this time round, and I would like to see them in September, please.
Thank you for that. So I will continue to look at the agenda and try and keep it a reasonable agenda and prioritise what we think is most required of the scrutiny committee. But like you, Councillor Lehman, I think they should be scrutinised and should come to committee. And I think you'll definitely be seeing them coming up. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. I thank Chair and Vice Chair for looking into the request I made for scrutiny, the 4-day week reports that are coming forward. Yeah. I would just like some reassurance that the meeting will be done in a timely manner that enables actually this committee to give them good value and then preferably that ahead of publication of then the report, so then when members do receive it, full council, they are doing it with the best quality reports that they can do.
Yes, your request has been considered by Councillor Drew and myself, and we are working with officers to try and bring that forward in a timely fashion. But and on that note, that will be a separate meeting coming up, of which we haven't confirmed the date as of yet, but because I'm still looking at that, but it's likely to be, I think, the 14th, but which, yeah, it is not great, but I am looking at that. So yeah, July. Yeah, sorry, Councillor Bradham, I should have stated that. Yeah. The other thing, sorry, I'll do another point.
Thank you, I appreciate. If it can be looked to being earlier, because that's very close to full council, and at the end of the day, the whole point, as Councillor Bradham said at the AGM about pre-scrutiny, is to make sure that once the decision was made, it's made with the best quality report. If we look at the time for full council, that is very, very close. And I would expect officers would have predicted, I'm sure the reports the consultation closed some time ago, so I do hope that you're able to resolve that a little earlier. Thank you, Chair, and Vice Chair, for accepting it and the work you're doing towards it.
Thank you for that, and I agree. I think the sooner we have the meeting before full council, the better. But that's my view on that, and we will keep working towards bringing that forward in as much of a timely fashion as we can. The other thing I wanted to mention was if I could bring in Pippa, about training. The 22nd of July. What was the time? 5:30 via Zoom. We're going to have a scrutiny training session. We've had some new members of the committee, and it's we're due one. So if members could, 6 o'clock. So if we could just put that in your diaries as a hold that date. Councillor Drew, did you have any other dates or anything coming up on the work programme? Okay, so we will move on to the date of the next meeting, which, as I've said, is not as it is in the agenda paper, likely because we will have an additional meeting on the 4-day working week papers. The following meeting from that will be on the 11th of September. Thank you everyone for attending, and thank you to the Cabinet for taking questions. And we'll close the meeting there. Thank you.